The maintenance hangar at Denver Regional Airport smelled like grease and jet fuel. Sarah Kane wiped her hands on an oil-stained rag, checking the hydraulic lines on a 737 for the third time that morning. Her coworkers thought she was obsessive, maybe paranoid. But Sarah had learned a long time ago that the difference between life and death was hidden in details others missed. "Hey Kane," one of the mechanics called from across the hangar. "You done yet? We got 3 more birds to turn around before the afternoon rush." Sarah didn't look up. "Almost. Just want to make sure this pressure valve is solid. It's fine. You always say that. Then you spend an extra hour checking things that passed inspection yesterday. That's because inspection isn't enough." Sarah's voice carried an edge that made the mechanic back off. She finished her check, signed off on the paperwork, and moved to the next aircraft. The other mechanics had stopped trying to understand her. Sarah Kane was good at her job, maybe the best they had. But she was weird. Quiet. Intense. She never joined them for drinks after shifts. Never talked about her past. Never seemed to relax. What they didn't know was that Sarah Kane wasn't her real name. It was a construction, a careful lie built over 5 years of hiding. Her real name was Captain Elena Rodriguez, call sign Viper 6, former F-18 pilot who'd been declared killed in action over the Pacific in 2019. The world thought she was dead. Her squadron had held a memorial. Her parents had buried an empty coffin. Her name was engraved on a wall at Naval Air Station Lemoore alongside other fallen pilots. But Elena Rodriguez hadn't died that day. She'd survived the crash, survived the rescue, and then made the hardest decision of her life. She'd chosen to stay dead. The nightmares had started 3 weeks after the crash. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the cockpit, watching the warning lights flash, feeling the aircraft tear itself apart around her. The ejection had worked, but barely. She'd hit the water hard. Broken ribs, punctured lung, hypothermia setting in before the rescue helicopter arrived. The doctors said she was lucky. The psychiatrists said she had severe PTSD. The Navy said she could take medical leave, get treatment, come back when she was ready. But Elena knew she'd never be ready. The thought of climbing back into a cockpit made her hands shake. The sound of jet engines triggered panic attacks. She'd gone from being one of the Navy's most confident pilots to someone who could barely function, so she'd made a choice. During a transfer between medical facilities, she'd simply walked away, changed her name, found work that kept her around aircraft but didn't require her to fly them. Became Sarah Kane, aircraft mechanic, invisible and safe. 5 years later, she was still hiding, still checking hydraulic lines with the precision of someone who knew exactly what happened when systems failed at 30,000 feet, still carrying the weight of a life she'd abandoned. That afternoon, Sarah was in the employee lounge when her supervisor found her. "Kane, we need you on the field. Gate 14. They've got a maintenance issue on an A320, won't take off until someone checks it out." "What's the problem?" "Flight crew reported unusual vibrations during taxi. Probably nothing. But the captain won't budge until maintenance clears it." Sarah grabbed her toolkit and headed to Gate 14. The A320 was fully loaded, passengers already seated, waiting for takeoff clearance. The captain met her at the boarding door, concern visible in his expression. "Thanks for coming. I know it's probably nothing, but something felt wrong during taxi. Just want to be sure." Sarah nodded. "You were right to call it. Give me 20 minutes. She spent the next half hour going over every system she could access from the ground. The landing gear, the hydraulic lines, the engine mounts. Everything looked normal. But she trusted the captain's instincts. Good pilots didn't imagine problems. Finally, she found it. A tiny crack in a mounting bracket, barely visible, something that wouldn't show up on routine inspection. It wasn't critical yet, but another few hours of flight stress, and it could fail catastrophically. "Captain," Sarah called up to the cockpit. "You were right. Found a stress fracture in the number 2 engine mount. This bird's not going anywhere until we replace it." The captain's relief was visible. "How long?" 3 hours minimum. We need to deplane the passengers." The passengers weren't happy about the delay, but Sarah didn't care. She'd just saved 240 lives, and they'd never know it. That was fine. She wasn't looking for recognition. She'd given up on that 5 years ago. The replacement took 4 hours. By the time Sarah cleared the aircraft for flight, the sun was setting. She was exhausted, covered in grease, ready to go home and collapse. She was walking back to the hangar when she heard the announcement over the terminal speakers. Attention. Medical emergency. We need medical personnel to Gate 7 immediately. Sarah kept walking. Not her problem. She was a mechanic, not a medic. Then she heard the follow-up. We have a medical emergency on Flight 447 to San Diego. The captain has collapsed. We need anyone with flight experience to identify themselves immediately. Sarah stopped walking. Flight 447. She'd been tracking that departure. Knew it was an Airbus A320, same type she'd just worked on. Knew it was fully loaded. Knew the co-pilot was young, maybe 6 months out of training. And she knew that if the captain was down, that young co-pilot was about to face a nightmare scenario with zero backup. This isn't your problem, she told herself. You're not a pilot anymore. You're Sarah Kane, mechanic. This isn't your responsibility. But her feet were already moving toward the terminal. By the time she reached Gate 7, it was chaos. Passengers were being asked to deplane. Flight attendants were on their phones. Airport security was trying to control the situation. Sarah pushed through to the gate agent. What's the situation? The agent, a woman in her 50s with stress written across her face, barely looked at her. Ma'am, please step back. This is a security situation. I'm asking what's wrong with the pilot. The captain had a heart attack. The co-pilot is asking if anyone on board has flight experience. We're trying to find another pilot, but everyone's already on assignments. We might have to cancel the flight. Or you let me help. Sarah's voice cut through the noise with authority that surprised even her. The gate agent finally looked at her, really looked. Who are you? Aircraft mechanic. But I used to be something else. Let me talk to the co-pilot. 5 minutes later, Sarah stood in the cockpit doorway. The co-pilot, a man who looked barely 25, had the expression of someone drowning. The captain was being moved by paramedics, unconscious, but alive. Who are you? The co-pilot asked, desperation in his voice. Someone who can help. What's your experience level? 600 hours total, 300 in type. This is my 2nd month flying commercially. His voice shook. I can fly the plane, but I've never handled an emergency like this solo. They're saying it'll be 2 hours before they can get another captain here. You don't need another captain. Sarah heard herself say the words before she could stop them. You need a co-pilot. Someone to back you up, handle communications, manage systems. I can do that. You're a mechanic. I used to be a Navy pilot. F-18s carrier operations. I can handle an A320. The co-pilot stared at her. If you're lying, I'm not. Call the tower. Ask them to verify my credentials. Captain Elena Rodriguez, call sign Viper 6, formerly attached to VFA 151. They'll tell you I'm dead, but I can prove I'm not. 20 minutes of phone calls later, Sarah Kane was sitting in the right seat of the A320, wearing a borrowed flight suit, running through pre-flight checks with shaking hands. The tower had verified her identity, or at least verified that someone matching her description and knowledge had once been Captain Rodriguez. The airline's legal team was going insane. The FAA was scrambling to figure out how to classify this situation, but the co-pilot, whose name was Michael Torres, had made the decision. I don't care about the paperwork. If she can help me get these passengers to San Diego safely, that's all that matters. Sarah's hands moved across the instruments with muscle memory that 5 years of hiding hadn't erased. The training came back, the procedures, the confidence. For the first time since the crash, sitting in a cockpit didn't feel like drowning. It felt like coming home. Okay, Michael, she said, her voice steady. Let's go through this step by step. I'll handle radios and systems. You focus on flying the aircraft. We're going to get everyone home safe. Michael nodded, some of the panic leaving his face. Okay. What do we do first? First, we tell the passengers their mechanic just became their co-pilot, and then we fly. The announcement went out. Passengers were given the option to deplane. Most stayed. Some recorded the moment on their phones. This was already becoming a story, but Sarah didn't care about that. She cared about the 237 people whose lives depended on her doing the job she'd trained for. The job she'd run from. the job she'd thought she'd never do again. The A320 pushed back from the gate. Michael handled the taxi with Sarah calling out checklists, watching instruments, being the second set of eyes and hands that every pilot needs. At the runway threshold, Michael hesitated. I've never taken off without a captain before. You're not alone. I'm here. And Michael? You've got this. Trust your training. He did. The takeoff was textbook perfect. As the wheels left the ground, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Purpose. They climbed through 10,000 feet when Sarah's radio crackled with a frequency she hadn't heard in half a decade. Military Guard frequency. Someone was calling her. Aircraft November 447. Bravo. This is Hawk Flight. 2 F-22s from Buckley Air Force Base. We've been monitoring your situation. Say your co-pilot's name. Sarah's hand froze on the radio. They knew. Someone in the military chain had recognized her name, put 2 and 2 together, and scrambled fighters to verify the impossible. Michael looked at her. Should I answer? Number. Sarah keyed the radio herself. Hawk Flight. This is November 447 Bravo. Co-pilot is Captain Elena Rodriguez. Call sign, Viper 6. The radio went silent. Then a voice, familiar, impossible. Viper 6, this is Hawk 1. Confirm your identity. Say something only Viper would know. Sarah closed her eyes. The voice belonged to Commander James Mitchell, her former squadron leader, the man who'd given the eulogy at her memorial. Hawk 1, Viper 6. You still owe me $50 from that poker game in Bahrain, and you promised you'd stop betting on hands you couldn't win. Another long silence. Then Mitchell's voice, thick with emotion. Holy hell. Elena? You're alive? Yeah, Jamie. I'm alive. Long story. Can it wait until we land these people? Copy that, Viper. Hawk Flight will provide escort. We'll talk on the ground. And Elena? Welcome back. 2 F-22 Raptors pulled up alongside the A320, waggling their wings in salute. Sarah saw them through the cockpit window, felt tears running down her face, and let them fall. Michael stared at the fighters, then at Sarah. You're really a Navy pilot. Were. Past tense. The fighters say otherwise. The flight to San Diego was smooth. Sarah handled communications, managed systems, and talked Michael through every decision. By the time they began their descent, he was flying with confidence, making the calls, trusting his training. The landing was perfect. As the A320 taxied to the gate, the passengers erupted in applause. Michael looked at Sarah, exhausted but grateful. I couldn't have done this without you. Thank you. You would have figured it out. You're a good pilot, Michael. Trust that. At the gate, the situation exploded. Airport security, FAA investigators, airline executives, and standing behind them all, in full Navy dress uniform, Commander Mitchell. Sarah climbed out of the cockpit and came face to face with the man who'd mourned her 5 years ago. Captain Rodriguez? Mitchell said formally. Then he dropped the formality and pulled her into a fierce embrace. You damn ghost, where the hell have you been? Hiding, Sarah whispered. I'm sorry, Jamie. I'm so sorry. The debriefing took 6 hours. Sarah told them everything. The crash, the PTSD, the decision to disappear, the 5 years working as a mechanic under a false name, the moment she'd chosen to reveal herself to save a plane full of people. The legal implications were enormous. Technically, she'd deserted. Technically, she'd committed fraud. Technically, she should face court-martial. But technically didn't matter when set against 237 lives saved by a pilot who'd been too broken to fly but had flown anyway. The Navy convened a board. Sarah sat before 5 senior officers and told her story again. She didn't make excuses, didn't try to justify abandoning her post. She'd made her choices. She'd live with the consequences. Captain Rodriguez, the board president, said after deliberating, Your actions constitute a serious breach of military protocol. However, given the circumstances and your subsequent actions, we're prepared to offer you a choice. Face court-martial or accept an honorable discharge and separation from service. Sarah nodded. I'll take the discharge, sir. There's a third option. The president looked at her steadily. Return to service. Not as a pilot, as an instructor, teaching others how to handle emergencies, how to manage PTSD, how to come back from trauma. The Navy needs officers who understand what it means to break and how to rebuild. Sarah sat in silence, processing. Returned to the Navy. Not as Viper 6, but as something else. Someone who taught others to survive what she'd barely survived. Can I think about it, sir? You have 1 week. Dismissed. That night, Sarah sat in a hotel room, staring at her phone. Her parents' number was on the screen. She hadn't called them in 5 years. They thought she was dead. Mourned her. Buried an empty coffin. Now she had to tell them the truth. She pressed call. Her mother answered on the second ring. Hello? Mom. Sarah's voice broke. It's me. It's Elena. I'm alive. I'm so sorry, but I'm alive. The sound of her mother's cry could be heard across the room. The reunion happened 2 days later. Private, emotional, devastating. Her parents held her, sobbed, demanded explanations she could barely give. Her father's first words, "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I was ashamed." Sarah couldn't look at them. "Because I failed. Because I thought you'd be better off remembering a hero than living with a coward." "You're our daughter," her mother said fiercely. "Hero or coward, dead or alive, you're our daughter. We needed you. Do you understand that? We needed you alive." "I know. I know. I'm sorry." The media found the story within hours. Dead Navy pilot saves commercial flight. The resurrection of Viper 6. Ghost pilot returns from the grave. Sarah declined most interviews, but she did one, with a military news outlet, for the veterans who needed to hear her story. "Why disappear?" the reporter asked. "Because I thought being broken meant I was useless. I thought PTSD made me weak. I thought my family and my squadron would be better off mourning a hero than dealing with a broken survivor. I was wrong about all of it." What would you say to veterans struggling with similar issues? Don't do what I did. Don't hide. Don't let shame silence you. Being broken doesn't mean being finished. Get help. Fight for yourself. You're worth fighting for. The interview went viral. Hundreds of veterans reached out, sharing their own struggles, finding courage in her story. Sarah became an accidental advocate, a voice for those struggling in silence. 1 week later, she stood before the Navy board again. "I'll accept the instructor position, sir, if you'll have me." "Welcome back, Captain Rodriguez. You'll report to Naval Air Station Pensacola in 30 days. You'll be teaching emergency procedures and trauma management to naval aviators." Sarah nodded. "One more thing, sir. I'd like to make a request." "Go ahead. I'd like my call sign retired. Viper 6 died 5 years ago. I'm not her anymore. Then who are you, Captain?" Sarah thought about the question, thought about 5 years of hiding, about the moment she'd chosen to step into that cockpit, about the lives saved because she'd finally stopped running. "Man, I'm someone who learned that you can't outrun your purpose. I'm someone who broke and rebuilt herself. I'm Phoenix, sir, because I came back from ashes." The board president smiled. "Welcome back, Phoenix. Go teach others how to rise." Sarah Kane disappeared into paperwork and legal fiction. Captain Elena Rodriguez, call sign Phoenix, returned to the Navy as an instructor at Pensacola. Her classes were legendary. She taught emergency procedures, trauma management, and most importantly, she taught pilots that breaking wasn't the end. "I crashed," she told her students. "I developed PTSD. I ran away and hid for 5 years. And then one day I had to choose between staying hidden or saving lives. I chose to save lives. And in doing that, I saved myself." Her story spread beyond the military. She spoke at veteran events, at PTSD awareness conferences, at colleges. The ghost pilot who'd been declared dead and came back to save a plane full of people became a symbol of resilience. The passengers from Flight 447 stayed in touch. They sent her letters, invited her to weddings and graduations, thanked her for the futures she'd given them. One passenger, a woman named Claire, wrote, "You gave me 20 more years with my grandchildren. I can never repay that." Sarah kept the letters in a box, read them when the nightmares returned, when the shame tried to creep back. reminded herself that hiding had been the wrong choice, but coming back had been the right one. Commander Mitchell visited her at Pensacola 6 months after her return. They walked along the flight line, watching student pilots run through training exercises. "You know what I realized?" Mitchell said. "We failed you. After the crash, we should have done more. Should have recognized how badly you were struggling. You did everything right, Jamie. I was the one who ran. Maybe. But I'm glad you came back, even if it took 5 years and a medical emergency to make it happen." Sarah smiled. "Sometimes the universe has to hit you over the head before you listen." That night, Sarah did something she hadn't done in 5 years. She went to the flight line, borrowed a training aircraft, and took it up. Solo flight. Just her and the sky. She climbed to 10,000 feet, rolled the aircraft, felt the G's, and laughed out loud. The fear was still there. The nightmares would probably never completely go away. But she was flying again. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. The radio crackled. "Phoenix, this is Tower. You're clear for aerobatic maneuvers in your designated area." Sarah keyed the mic. "Copy that, Tower. Phoenix is free." And she was. Free from the past. Free from the shame. Free from the belief that being broken meant being finished. They'd declared her dead 5 years ago. But the sky never did. It waited, patient, knowing she'd return. Because some people are born to fly. And no amount of trauma, no amount of time, no amount of running can change that. Captain Elena Rodriguez, callsign Phoenix, had learned that lesson the hard way. Now she spent her days teaching it to others, teaching them that crashes don't define you. Recovery does. That breaking isn't the end. It's just the beginning of rebuilding. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is admit you need help and accept it. 5 years lost. 237 lives saved. 1 pilot returned from the dead. That was the math. And in the end, it balanced. Phoenix flew until sunset, then brought the aircraft home. Smooth landing. Textbook procedure. She climbed out, stood on the tarmac, and looked up at the darkening sky. "Thank you," she whispered to no one in particular. To the universe. To second chances. To the emergency that had forced her to stop hiding. Then she walked back to the hangar, ready to teach the next generation of pilots how to survive the impossible. Because Captain Elena Rodriguez, Phoenix, had done exactly that. And if she could come back from the dead, anyone could.